achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC 171 event, which will take place on March 15th from Dallas, Texas, and will feature the newly crowned welterweight champion, whether it be Johny Hendricks or Robbie Lawler, as they meet for the vacant title that George St. Pierre left behind in what is truly the end of an era as far as the UFC's welterweight division is concerned. I'll be giving you my 5 main card predictions. All 8 of my preliminary breakdowns will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. This is a massive event, 13 fights in all. There aren't any injuries between now and fight day, so I really look forward to it. I'm coming off an alright event. I went 6-3, which isn't a great record. I won a little bit of cash, but overall it wasn't as good as my previous ones had been. So I really look forward to putting a good show together for this one. And 5 main card fights, a lot of good action. Let's get to the first one. We kick off the pay-per-view portion of the card in the UFC's light heavyweight division as Ovince St-Preux, 14-5-0, battles newly minted light heavyweight Nikita Al Capone Krylov, 16-3-0. Krylov, this is his 205-pound debut, and taking in a short notice, replacing the now departed Thiago Silva. He weighed just 216 pounds since last bout at heavyweight, so it wasn't really hard to see he was angling towards heading to light heavyweight, and it shouldn't have been that big of a cut for the young man. Physically, both guys will stand 6'3", and a slight reach advantage for OSP. Now, St-Preux 2-0 in the UFC so far, and he went 6-1 in Strikeforce with his only loss against Gegard Mousasi, so he's been fighting at a high level for a while and doing quite well. For Krylov, he comes in, he's a black belt in Kyokushin Karate, while OSP is a collegiate athlete, very strong, very gifted athlete, couple of runs at pro football, but I think he couldn't make anything stick there. Now, Krylov, 6 wins by knockout overall, 10 wins by submission, all coming inside the first round. His one knockout loss came against Sao Palele in his debut, happening in the 3rd round of a very ugly fight. And it was the only fight to go out of the first round. He also has 2 submission losses, which also occurred inside the first round. For OSP, 7 wins by knockout, 3 submission wins, and 1 knockout loss in his record. 4-4 in fights that go the distance, so he hasn't exactly been stellar when fights go to the judges over his career. Now, OSP, his striking is improving, but he's still raw, and relying on his natural ability. He has very good power, throws very hard punches, and very strong, very heavy leg kicks. He slowed down a little bit against Gian Valente in his UFC debut, but again, that debut factor can have a major impact. Now, he averages 1.59 takedowns at 60% and has used his ground game to control opponents in the past, and he potentially could look to do that here. But Krylov has some pretty solid submission skills, threw up some decent attempts against a pretty talented ground fighter in Sao Palele. OSP, from my point, will be best served by avoiding the ground at least early on, waiting for fatigue and sweat the impact, and shut down those submission attempts from Krylov. Now, Krylov, he caught Walt Harris early in his last fight with a beautiful head kick and finished him in very short order. He threw a lot of kicks in that fight, kept spamming the kicks at him, had some success against Sal and close with some short barrages along the cage, but overall he didn't show a lot of head movement with his striking or a lot of angles. He comes straight forward, which can set you up against a guy who's faster than you, and normally in the heavyweight division he is faster because he's a smaller man. Going down to light heavyweight, he's going to have to deal with some speed of guys like OSP that are naturally smaller men, even though OSP is no slouch in the size department, but nonetheless he should be faster. Again, OSP is more athletic too, which should help him out as well. Krylov is young, and he took advantage of a very inexperienced opponent in his last fight and got him out of there quickly, which has kind of been the MO for his career, and it's helped him succeed. For my money, he has to attack OSP early and often and get after him and not allow this fight to be dragged out in the later stages. But overall, I think OSP is simply too quick. He's too experienced, and he'll either dominate the fight from the start or be a little bit cautious, feel Krylov out, wear him down with some grappling and some decent strikes. And either way, my prediction is Ovince St-Preux to defeat Nikita Krylov by TKO. In the first of 3 UFC welterweight bouts tonight, we have the number 6 ranked Jake Shields, 29-6-1 with 1 no contest, battling number 12 ranked Hector Lightning Lombard, 33-4-1, also with 1 no contest. Now, this is kind of an interesting matchup because what we have here is the former Bellator middleweight champion taking on the former Strikeforce middleweight champion. Neither man actually lost their title belts. They simply left the organization, and the division and the title was moved off to another fighter. Now, it's a massive fight for both men in the welterweight picture, simply because with GSP gone and a new champion being crowned tonight, there's a very good chance that the winner of this bout could move up into a number 1 contenders bout next time out. At least they put themselves in a position to get a very important fight next time out to move 1 step closer to a title shot. Now, this is the second fight for Lombard at welterweight, and keep in mind here, he wasn't really tested in his debut, just a short minute and 48 seconds. Looked a little drained to me, but he said he felt good. This was his new home, which is good to see, because now, height-wise, he certainly is built to be a welterweight and not a middleweight. Now, Shields is going to have a 3-inch height advantage and a 1-inch reach advantage, but Lombard should be the physically stronger man. Shields now is a top-level BJJ/American Jiu-Jitsu player, the way he likes to call it, and a former NCAA Division II wrestler. Lombard, on the other hand, a BJJ black belt and a 4th Dan black belt in Judo, a former Olympic competitor as well. Now, Shields, 10 wins by submission. Lombard 7, and neither have been submitted overall. Big power advantage for Lombard, though, overall, with 19 knockouts in his career. Shields not known for his striking. Jake has been stopped twice in the feet. Jake Ellenberger took him out with some knee shots from the clinch. The other one came 14 years ago, and he has a very good chin. He survived an H-bomb from Dan Henderson and rallied back to win that fight when Henderson gassed out back in Strikeforce. Now, Lombard, he's 7-4 in overall in fights that go the distance. All losses over his career have been by decision, while Jake is 16-4. His most recent decision loss coming against George St. Pierre. The other 3 came before 2004. It shows how good Jake Shields has been and over such a long period of time he's been doing it in, which is quite impressive. Now, Lombard should have a speed advantage, but he likes to plod forward, looking to explode and really catch guys off guard, and I think Shields should have some success closing the distance, at least tying up with Lombard in this fight. Now, Lombard, he likes to throw these looping hooks in barrages. We saw him take out Nate Marquardt when he landed one. He has some decent kicks as well, but he has some long periods of inactivities we saw in the Tim Boetsch fight, and it allows his opponent to line him up and land some shots of his own. Jake's striking, for the most part, is stiff, but he stays active, which is important. He has a nice jab, will throw some body quick kicks, and those are his best weapons. He struggled with the speed of Ellenberger and GSP, and that certainly showed up in the long haul there. Now, Yushin Okami, when he fought Hector Lombard, he used a very grinding style, especially in the clinch, and he wore Lombard down a little bit. Shields made Tyron Woodley work along the cage as well, and eventually got the decision because of his ability to control Tyron along the cage. Now, Jake, he keeps attacking in close, little punches, just enough activity to stay busy, avoid the separation, which he'll need to do against Hector Lombard. He does not want to be separated from Lombard in close. Now, we saw Shields catch a kick of Woodley for a takedown, which is something important because we saw similar things from Yushin Okami against Hector Lombard, and he put him on his back several times. That's a major concern if Jake Shields can get on top of you. Lombard didn't have a lot to offer off his back against Okami. He was mounted by Yushin as well, and Shields has such a smothering game, it can be a major issue if you get put on your back and Shields is on top and working. Jake did have some trouble taking Tyron Woodley down from the clinch, and considering that Lombard is a judo player and that's going to make him extra strong in the clinch, that's a major concern for Shields. Overall, Jake went 2-for-14 against a judo player in Yoshihiro Akiyama. My apologies. His grappling, for the most part, was neutralized, but Akiyama didn't do enough on the feet to steal that decision. Lombard's cardio is a major question mark, especially at 170 pounds until we see it really tested. But Jake is far from a world beater as far as it comes to cardio. He will slow down as well. From my point, I think Lombard should be able to defend the takedowns. Will do a good job of neutralizing Jake's grappling. Lombard shows some decent cardio in the Okami fight. He's able to battle back in a tough situation and nearly get the win in the third round. Lombard's short stature, as I mentioned, his judo base will make it very hard for Jake to get him down. Lombard will outland him. He won't make the same mistakes he did against Tim Boetsch. Jake is tough, but I think Hector can get there, land a big shot. And my prediction is Hector Lombard to defeat Jake Shields by TKO. In the UFC's lightweight division, number 15th ranked Diego the Dream Sanchez, 26-6-0, battles undefeated Myles the Fury Jury, 13-0. This is a massive opportunity for Jury. It's a step up in competition, both overall in scale and in caliber of opponent. He's faced recent tough fighters in guys like Saunders, Johnson, and Nijim and Ricci, and Sanchez is an ultimate fighter, former ultimate fighter as well. But for the most part, this is a major step up against an established opponent. Sanchez overall has faced much better competition: Gilbert Melendez, Takanori Gomez, BJ Penn, Jake Elmer, Martin Cam, and the list goes on and on. He's a veteran who's been around for a long time. Now, what we have here is Jury's calculated striking against Sanchez's aggressive, brawling style. Now, Diego has struggled with technical strikers in the past, guys like Martin Kampman, but he overcame it with his aggression. Overall, Sanchez has a slight edge in strikes landed per minute at 2.83 to 2.37 for Jury, but Jury does a nice job of limiting what his opponents land, only giving up 1.07 strikes per minute against Sanchez, who gets tagged at a rate of 2.81. So that's a big advantage for Jury if he can find a way to neutralize Sanchez's aggression. Now, Sanchez, he was taking a lot of shots from Gilbert in exchange to land his own, and that's something okay because he has a decent chin. It holds up very well. His only career knockout was against BJ Penn due to a cut, but we did see him get rocked by Gilbert Melendez. He got caught by a knee strike from John Hathaway, and he also got dropped by a counter right from Martin Kampman, but the guy's very, very durable and very tough to put away. Again, as I said, he got dropped by Gilbert Melendez in the third round he dropped Gilbert Melendez in the third round with a vicious uppercut. I rewatched that fight, very enjoyable. He had a great switch on the mat. He wrestled very well against a very good wrestler, Gilbert Melendez. So Diego Sanchez, far from shot out. He certainly has something to offer still. Some of his best weapons, he's in some nice stiff body kicks to Melendez that certainly hurt him a little bit. He has some good kicks, which are something he can use at range when he's not in that brawling range, but he needs to get in the pocket and he needs to throw against a guy like Jury. Now, Jury landed some big shot, a big right hand against Mike Ricci. He stopped Ramsey Nijem with the same hand, and he's a decent push kick, which helps him to manage distance. He needs to utilize that to keep Diego from coming forward with recklessly. Now, Jury has a solid striking game, but he paces himself. He looks for openings. He throws counters. He does have 5 knockouts, so he does have some power, but he hasn't really faced an aggressive striker like Diego. We saw him face Michael Johnson, and Johnson, he put him on the mat and kept him there, and that's how Jury won that fight. Now, Jury, he didn't do much in the exchange with Mike Ricci and was a little bit concerning. He looked a little tentative when Ricci did push forward, and against Diego, he's going to be facing that all night. Jury overall is good wrestling. He's a BJJ brown belt, 3.37 takedowns at 64%. He landed 4 against Ricci, 3 against Michael Johnson. He has good top control. But we saw him struggle a little bit with Ramsey Nijem on the mat. Nijem got the better of some of the exchanges, and Nijem's a good wrestler. We'll see how he stacks up against Diego. Now, Diego's equally a very strong wrestler as well, 9 submissions overall. He's a BJJ black belt. He only averages 1.74 takedowns at 22%. A lot has to do with the Martin Kampmann fight where he had a ton of attempts and only landed 1 or 2. He took Melendez down, which is not an easy feat. He had success against Paulo Thiago, who's a very strong ground fighter. And he's very tricky on the ground. He can lose position, though, during attacks, and that's one thing you do not want to give up against Myles Jury. Once you get the position, work to maintain it. Now, he has been taken down 7 times in his last 11 fights, which isn't a huge number considering some of the guys he's been facing. He's a very good defensive wrestler as far as I'm concerned. And one thing to keep in mind, Diego gets stronger as fights go. We saw him come back late against Martin Kampmann, dominate Jake Ellenberger late in that fight. And against Gilbert Melendez as well was a pretty impressive finish there. Jury's undefeated. He's yet to face a lot of adversity in his career. He's not tested like Sanchez can test a guy or has been tested himself. Diego didn't look good against, Takanori Gomi, but he missed weight. It was his return to lightweight, and it was also a trip to Japan, so that east to west travel or west to east travel can certainly take a lot out of a fighter. And I think he got some of that aggression back that he showed against Gilbert Melendez. I think that translates here. Sanchez will overcome a calculated strike with the pace and get the better of the ground exchanges as well. So my prediction is Diego Sanchez to defeat Myles Jury by decision. In our co-main event of the evening, we go back to the 170-pound division as the number 2 ranked and former interim champion, former WEC champion, the natural-born killer, Carlos Condit, 29-7-0, battles number 11th ranked Tyron, the chosen one, Woodley, in what should be an excellent matchup. Condit, he's fighting for a welterweight title shot. If he wins this, he most likely fights the winner of the main event. Woodley, this is the biggest fight of his career by far. He doesn't get a shot probably with a win here, but he certainly moves into position to challenge for one. Dana said Woodley overall wasn't ranked high enough to fight a guy like Condit, but then, typical Dana style goes back on it and moves Woodley back into position to get a shot at Condit. Overall, Carlos is going to have a 5-inch height advantage and 1-inch reach advantage, but Tyron Woodley's a physical specimen, a very strong individual, and that'll show up in some of the tight, close exchanges. Woodley, for the most part, is a boxer wrestler. Condit, more Muay Thai and BJJ. Now, Woodley, an NCAA Division I wrestler and a BJJ brown belt. He's got improving striking. He's got some knockout power. We saw him put away Josh Koscheck and Jay Haran. But only 3 knockouts overall, so he's still working to combine that power with technique that allows him to set up those knockouts. 5 submission wins, so he can handle himself on the ground. He has some decent decision wins over guys like Jordan Meehan, Paul Daly, and Tarek Safadine, using his wrestling pretty much only in those fights. Now, Condit's BJJ brown belt, and he's a lethal striker. He uses all his weapons, including some nasty elbow strikes and knees. He's 14-0 in fights ended by knockouts. That tells you how good a chin he has. He's stopped guys, Dong Young Kim, Dan Hardy, Martin Kampmann, and Rory McDonald, all with his hands. That shows how dangerous this man is. He has 13 submission wins, but he hasn't submitted a guy since WEC 32, where he caught Carlos Prater, and that was all the way back in 2008. So we really haven't seen a lot of Carlos Condit finishing guys on the mat of late. None in the UFC. But he's a very offensive guard nonetheless. Either attack or neutralize his opponent's top game like he did against Rory. We saw him sweep a very strong judo player in Dong Young Kim, and that led to the eventual knockout. Now, he just has some trouble staying vertical, 41% takedown defense. His last 3 fights, Martin Kampmann took him down 6 times, Johnny Hendricks 12, and George St. Pierre 7. You go back further, Rory put him on the mat 3 times, and Kampmann in Carlos Condit's debut put him on the mat 5 times. Overall, he's been taken down 35 times in his 9 UFC fights, and he was taken down 10 times in 5 WEC fights. So wrestlers have had success against Carlos Condit. But because he gets taken down a lot, that also tells us he gets up a lot. He was a handful for Johnny Hendricks on the mat, who's a high-level wrestler. He throws a lot of elbows off his back, submission attempts. He really utilizes that butterfly guard very effectively. Very good at getting back up, getting his feet under him. When he gets a little bit of separation, he can get his feet under, get his hips up, and he's back up on his feet, and he's attacking. He's very good that way. When Tyron Woodley uses a wrestling-based approach, which I expect him to try and use here, he appears to gas himself out. He's never faced anyone like Condit off his back either, but we've seen some fights where he does get tired out trying to hold guys down. Condit on the feet overall, he's lethal. He has a really nice jumping knee, which watch for him to try and land every time Woodley closes the distance. He throws a variety of kicks, smooth combinations, which he will finish with a kick, brutal power, and an excellent chin. He was dropped by Jake Ellenberger, and he took a ton of big shots against Johny Hendricks, but he kept coming back in that fight, and he ate a lot of Johny Hendricks' best power and didn't waver at all. Now, Woodley, as I said, he has improving striking. He lands some big shots, and he put an opponent away if he lands flush, but he's not as technical. Strikes absorbed per minute slightly higher than strikes landed per minute, which is a bit of a concern. He throws more horsepower over technique, and I keep emphasizing that because that will show up against a guy like Condit, who has power, but he also has technique. The way I look at it, Woodley will slow down in fights, especially if he relies on his wrestling that he did against Paul Daly and against Jordan Meehan. He's heavily muscled, and it takes a lot of a guy to just hold somebody down for 3 rounds. He looked to have an improved overall approach in the Nate Marquardt fight using some wrestling, but he was gassing against Jake Shields just fighting along the cage, and that's a major concern. I expect the first round to be close. Woodley will probably land some takedowns, but I expect he's going to slow down from having to fight off Condit, who continually keeps coming back and forcing him to get up and fighting and pushing. Or Woodley opts to strike with Condit and he can't keep up, and eventually the pace and the variety of what Condit can throw at him catches up to him. I think it's either way, it's going to be trouble. When Woodley slows down, he tends to put his back in the cage and he waits on his opponent to attack, and that's bad against a guy like Carlos Condit. Either way, through early combinations or simply fatigue setting in later, my prediction is Carlos Condit to defeat Tyron Woodley by knockout. In the main event, we remain in the UFC's welterweight division to crown a new champion as the number 1 ranked Johny Big Rig Hendricks 15-2-0 battles number 3 ranked Ruthless Robbie Lawler 22-9-0 with 1 no contest. Hendricks, this is the second consecutive opportunity to win the welterweight title, so he needs to make good. A lot of people felt he won the first one against Georges St-Pierre, and certainly in a lot of people's eyes, he could have been given the nod. Either way, he needs to make good, because losing back-to-back title fights is not a good thing. Lawler, huge opportunity since rejuvenating his career in the UFC. He's really turned some heads and climbed the ranks very quickly. Lawler last fought for a title in 2011 against Jacare for the Strikeforce middleweight title, so he's certainly not a stranger to title fights either. Physically, Lawler will be 2 inches taller, but he'll have a 5-inch reach advantage, which is very telling, especially at the exchanges, if he can land first. He fought for a long time at middleweight, so he knows how to fight, fight larger than he's used to. And since cutting into welterweight, it appears like his speed is back. Now, Hendricks is a highly decorated NCAA Division I wrestler, averages 4.77 takedowns at 50%. He took Georges St-Pierre down twice. As I mentioned previously, he took down Carlos Condit 12 times. He also put Josh Koscheck on his back twice, which is no easy feat to accomplish. He has heavy ground and pound, but he's not a lay and pray guy. He'll either do some damage and control a guy on the ground for a little bit, or he gets a takedown, he gets right back up and continues attacking, and he likes to score points. And he said that himself. He says he doesn't mind when guys get up because it gives him a chance to put him right back on the mat again. I don't know how good a strategy that'll be against a tough striker like Robbie Lawler. Now, Lawler has some solid takedown defense. He shows some very fast hips and a lot of movement to avoid letting his opponent put him on the floor and get their hands on him. He has been submitted, though, 5 times in his career, and he's been taken down multiple times in fights. For example, Tim Kennedy put him down 5 times, but it took him 16 attempts. Jacare had some success as well, but, Robbie really made him work for it. Rory put him on the floor 4 of 6 times, but again, Robbie gets right back up. He's very good at that. He has worked on his defensive wrestling. Like I said, he gets right back up when guys like Rory or Josh Koscheck took him down. Hendricks, he could dominate this fight with his wrestling for 5 rounds. I don't anticipate him doing that. Between them, they have 26 knockouts. Hendricks, 8 of 15 wins by knockout. Lawler, 18 of 22. Very impressive numbers. Hendricks can land one big shot and put guys away like he did against Martin Kampmann or John Fitch, or he can land a series of shots, swarm his opponent, and put him away with some power. And he has power in both hands, which is very impressive. Now, he covers the distance very well with his strikes, which catches a lot of people off guard. He's a little short-armed, but he's able to get in and land on people. They don't anticipate it. But he doesn't throw a lot of kicks. He has some surprising speed, but he doesn't throw a lot of kicks, which is a major concern against a diverse striker. Hendricks was getting hammered with some big shots against Carlos Condit. He was moving forward very recklessly, looking to land that big shot and put him away, and Condit didn't go away. And simply put, if Condit could have defended some of the takedowns, I think he could have won that fight. He showed a good chin, but again, Robbie Lawler has some really ridiculous power, and if he hits you, it's very difficult to maintain after that. And again, Hendricks on average gets hit more than he hits, which is a concern against Robbie Lawler. You do not want to be exchanging shot for shot with the guy that can put people away like Lawler can, but same thing for Lawler. Exchanging shots with Hendricks, you do not want to do that either. One thing with Hendricks, too, he likes to throw multiples of the same strike consecutively, just kind of double and triple up hooks, and that can be a little predictable, and opponents can see that coming and step back, and it doesn't take them much to avoid it. Now, Lawler, he throws a lot more kicks than Hendricks does, and he simply put, he has more weapons to score the knockout with. We saw him land a flying knee against Adlan Amagov, took out Bobby Volker with a head kick. brutal right hook took out Melvin Manhoef. He can knock guys out with just about anything he lands, and he throws and lands successfully. He's only been knocked out once in his career by Nick Diaz quite a number of years ago, but he needs to be careful again. Just like I said, Hendricks needs to be careful of Lawler. Lawler needs to be careful of Hendricks. He can't give up unnecessary chances and allow Hendricks to land. Hendricks needs to avoid getting drawn into a slugfest. I have a feeling that's not going to happen based on the Carlos Condit fight. He takes way too much damage. Koscheck landed a lot of shots against him, so did Condit, as I keep mentioning that. He went shot for shot with Carlos, and Lawler has more power as far as I'm concerned than Carlos Condit does, and should be able to put him away if he can land flush. One thing we saw Hendricks do, he kept using his wrestling against Condit to bail him out. I don't know if that'll be an option here. Lawler has pretty good takedown defense, and he gets up very well, as I've already talked about. Lawler has a speed advantage, I think, which will surprise some people here, and the variety will be the key along with his massive power. Lawler's to date has been defying the odds significantly. Hendricks has all the tools to beat many fighters, but I think Lawler is a stylistic nightmare for him. He's a guy who can stand and bag and can put him away if Hendricks opts to exchange shots. So my prediction is the upset, Robbie Lawler to defeat Johny Hendricks by knockout. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC 171. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. I apologize, it was a bit of a longer video simply because there were some pretty good fights that needed a lot of in-depth breakdown and a lot of working parts that needed to incorporate. Either way, consider buying the bet packs if you're looking to break out of a slump. Hopefully I can turn it around after one bad showing despite having a bunch of really strong showings leading up to it. Either way, you're usually only as good as your last outing, so we'll see how I fare here. Nonetheless, as always, thank you very much for listening. Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions.